These are going to be the best decks in the game after the nerf, and first of all, I just like to have a quick moment of silence for Shaman. It went from a 53% win rate to a 41% win rate, absolutely obliterated the worst class in the game after just one nerf to the Gold Share Null. Okay, moving on, we have Undead Priest. The idea behind Undead Priest is simple. It's extremely fast and aggressive with really good early game stats with the Corporal, a 1-mana 1/3 that gives you bonus damage, Foul Egg, and Banshee, and then great direct damage to finish off the game with your hero power, Mind Shear, 2 Death Rattle minions that do damage, along with the Rotting Necromancer, which is a new card from the mini set. The next best deck in the game is Pure Paladin, which I would argue is actually the best deck in the game, but I'll get to that in a second. The idea behind the deck is pretty simple. You just want to play tempo, get out some pretty good stats. It's got a new card, the Purator, to give you some extra draw if you don't happen to draw Order in the Court to guarantee your late game cards, and you can just snowball from there. The reason why I think this deck is one of the best in the game, if not the best, is because, one, it's always been a top 5 deck, and it's just avoided nerfs because it's never been like the problem deck. It's just been like one step behind. And two, if you actually look at the play rate of Pure Paladin, it's at a 6.7%, with Undead Priest being at about a 2%. So it's played 3 times more, and its win rate is only 0.1 less, 57.16% win rate, versus a 57.28% win rate for Undead Priest. So considering the fact it's played so much more, I would consider it to be the best, but they're both very similar in power level. The next deck on the list is going to be Curse Implock, which is very similar to normal Implock in terms of win rate and playstyle, but it has a 4 times larger play rate, so I put it on the list. Both will be in the description though. The general idea of Curse Implock and normal Implock is to run the game early with your Imp package. You just have a ton of aggression, and then you can drop Imp King Rafaam turn 6 as a good reload. Where they differentiate is Curse Implock then wants to win the game through direct damage using the curses, and normal Implock wants to just keep generating board after board after board, even after it gets wiped, because you have a lot of other ways of generating imps. Both are good. I would highly recommend either of them. Let's jump into the next one. The next deck on the list is going to be Frost Aggro Death Knight. And yes, this deck did get hit pretty hard with the Construct Quarters nerf, but apparently at 4 mana, getting 3/4/5s with Rush, that also synergize really well with low-statted good Battlecry minions and low-statted good Death Rattle minions. Apparently, still a very, very good card. It definitely did drop by about 2.5% in terms of win rate, but even still, it's at about a 53% win rate now, and it's super good. You still got the direct damage with the Frostrim's Fury, Overseer, as well as the Marrow Manipulator. You have some decent early game and mid game pressure, although it's a little bit worse, like I said, because of the Construct Quarter nerf. And you're able to randomly generate direct damage when you need it with the Vizier as well as School Teacher. This deck basically just has everything you could ever want in an aggro deck. Good aggro, good burn, decent draw, and resource generation. It's just the nuts. The next deck on the list that's kind of flown under the radar recently and is starting to rise back up is Aggro Mage. This deck wasn't quite as fast as some of the other aggro decks out there, like the Death Knight as well as Evolved Shaman, but now that those have been nerfed and the meta has slowed down just a little bit, this deck is really having a chance to shine. You've got good direct damage with the Arc Splitter as well as Arcane Worm to give you Arcane Bolts. You got a late game win condition with Astalar. You got some decent removal and stall with Freeze and armor gain, and some good minion generation, things like Cold Case, the Sanctum, the Frostweave Dungeoneer, even Amplified Snow Flurry. And then in the late game, you can combo your opponent off with Agwyn and a ton of Arcane Bolts, or just do nearly infinite damage with Frozen Touch, which is very easy to infuse in a deck with a lot of really cheap minions. Overall, this deck is actually quite strong. I think it's the best mage deck in the game right now, but there is one that's pretty close behind. Before we get into the next mage deck, I would like to quickly talk about Fell Demon Hunter. Yes, this deck was nerfed a while ago, and the Relic of Dimensions nerf slowed it down just enough to no longer be really strong in the meta. But with a lot of the other faster decks recently being nerfed themselves, and the meta slowing down just a tiny bit, it leaves room for Fell Demon Hunter to once again become strong. In fact, before the nerf, it was at about a 0.03% play rate, and now it is at almost a 4% play rate. That is 100 times more frequent after the nerfs, which is still not as popular as some of the other decks like Pure Paladin out there, but it's still a very, very strong deck, and I predict that it will continue to rise in popularity as people realize how strong this deck is. The idea of the deck is simple. You rely on the relics and things like the Relic of Phantasms for your main board presence, and then if you're able to survive until, I want to say about turn 8, after you can play like 1, maybe 2 Relics of Dimensions, and then you're able to combo off with your spell damage cards and good direct damage like Fel Barrage, Unleash Fel, even Relic of Extinction to kill off big minions if you have to, and if that's not enough, you have the Artificer and Jace to win the game in the late game. The next mage deck is going to be Big Spell Mage, which has always been pretty good. The disruption that you potentially have with the Barbaric Sorceress and the fact that you could give yourself a cheap spell is just something that you can't really beat a lot of the times unless your opponent knows exactly how to play around it and can use up all their spells. So especially at lower ranks where people don't actually think about doing that, this deck will be even better. But yeah, you have ways of cheating out really powerful spells for cheap, but you also have decent early game pressure and survivability with the Pelican Diver, Amplified Snow Flurry, Mailbox Dancer to give yourself an early coin, Deepwater Evoker, and Reckless Apprentice, not to mention infinite scaling with Magister and Mordresh for good burst damage. And then again, you also have the big spell package with the Rune, as well as the Drakefire Amulet and Grey Sage Parrot that this deck is basically known for. The next deck on this list is going to be Death Rattle Rogue. This is kind of my dark horse because it's seen a slight increase in play rate and a pretty decent increase in win rate since the nerfs have gone live. And again, I think it's because, yes, this deck was nerfed to be slowed down a little bit a while back, similar to Fell Demon Hunter, but with some of the fastest decks in the game being nerfed, the meta has slowed down just enough for you to start getting good combos off with your Death Rattle Rogue again. The amount of power that this deck can put out there is pretty insane, but again, it is starting to be on the rise again, so I'm not 100% sure how good this deck will end up being, but it's definitely worth a try if you have most of these cards. The next deck on the list is going to be Quest Druid. It's a deck that I have personally not played yet, but it is the flavor of the month deck, and I will probably be playing it tomorrow or the next day. The idea behind the deck is pretty simple. You have the Quest, which allows you to have a secondary win condition and some added survivability with the armor gain, and then the extra win condition in Guff. But then you also have the main win condition of Astalar, Anubricon, as well as Bran. You have really good ramp still with the Guff, Nourish, and Wildbloom Seedsman. The Pathmaker actually allows you to get extra value out of the Nourish without having to split it in half with the Jerry Rig Carpenter. You have the Spammy Arcanist instead of Scale of Onyxia for some added removal. And again, because you have a lot of attack, you also have removal that way. It runs very similarly to Old Ramp Druid, and Capture the Gold Tooth Mine helps the consistency in getting Anubricon and some of your other larger cards, and overall it's just a surprisingly very good deck. This last deck is on the list because it is my most requested deck right now, and Brian Kibler made it. For those of you who don't know, Brian Kibler, he makes great content and has some really cool deck ideas. And because people have seen it from him, they want me to play it and talk about it. So here I am. I'm probably going to be playing this tomorrow or the next day along with the Quest Druid because they both look really fun. And the idea of the deck is simple. It's basically Zoolock, but for Hunter. You've got some decent draw with the Leatherworking Kit and a ton of beasts. You've got Dredge with a couple of 1-drops with the Caninatron. You have some late game win conditions with the Beastalker Tavish, Hope of Kael'thas, Huntsman, and the Hydrolodon. And then you have some surprise burst with the Shadehound. Shadehound with Rush will pump up your Beast +2/+2, which is kind of insane if you think about it, because as long as you can get a couple of minions to stick on the board, even just 2 of them, this is an immediate rush that also gives you +4 attack in terms of charge damage. So it's just really, really strong overall. You also run the new cards Bees because it infuses things almost immediately and is good removal and usually leaves you with like 1 minion up. It's just a really good deck in general, and I'm really excited to play it. Hopefully you guys enjoyed the video. I hope you guys enjoyed all of the decks. If there's anything you think I missed, let me know. I'll probably be making another list every single week. And since the meta is still fresh, this is subject to change. And next week, we'll probably have a more stable meta for me to talk about. So hopefully you guys enjoyed. See you in the next one. Bye.